Hi there everyone, Lars here from Camille's Harem, back with a final Kimi Wa Meido Sama review and analysis, brought to you by Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers, because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends, and today I come to you with a Christmas present. I mean, we're only hours away from Christmas, some are way closer to it than I am as of the moment of recording this video, but here it is. My Christmas present to you is some advice. Go and read the manga for Kimi Wa Meido Sama. It's going to make everything that happened in this episode make so much more sense. But don't just simply pick up where the anime left off. Go back to the first chapter and read through it all, because you need everything to make sense of what the heck is going to happen when you then pop into the most recent chapter, because it is the chapter that brings everything together and confirms that this is more than just a rom-com. This is a thriller, a supernatural horror story, and a rom-com all blended into one. And what we saw in this episode is merely the conclusion of one particular arc. The problem is that we are lacking a lot of the information from the anime in order to understand that. Instead, what we get seems to be a really weird cutoff point that has no catharsis whatsoever for the romantic and personal development that the main characters have undergone. So let's dive into this. This episode is incredibly straightforward. You have Yuki going out with Naka to go get a gift for Hitoyoshi, and while they're at the gacha machines and Yuki's getting taken for all she's worth trying to get the right little figurine for Hitoyoshi, his father arrives and tells her there is a way to get exactly what you want, because these little machines are going to steal everything from you. Your money and your hope. No, you're going to look directly into that machine. You're going to cast a spell of fear, saying, if you do not give me exactly what I want, I will kill you. And Yuki does that, and it's so horrifying that it spooks everyone in the vicinity, and lo and behold, the gacha machine is like, I don't want to die. Here's a little figurine that you want. Yuki is happy, Naka's okay, the man says farewell. Lo and behold, Yuki's going to meet him again at Hitiyoshi's house, because like I said, this is his dad. Now, this episode, this is a weird one in terms of pacing, because while watching it, it felt like it flew by, but no, really, you just watched almost 20 minutes worth of a lot of talking. And basically what goes down is this. Hitoyoshi is completely falling apart because, well, he wanted to protect Yuki by keeping her around at this home because he feels like that's where she really belongs. This is the place where she can feel normal, where she can continue to become a normal girl, and he's worried that his father's going to throw her out. But not only does his dad now know her, but he seems to have a good relationship with her. He even understands who she is. Suddenly, Hitoyoshi feels completely irrelevant. Meanwhile, Yuki is sweating bullets because she has a gift that she wants to give to Hitoyoshi, but she's been told by Naka to only do it at a very specific time and just between the two of them, because Naka, just like Riko, is beginning to play a little bit of matchmaker. Well, everything just kind of begins to careen a little bit for Hitoyoshi as he begins to wonder, what the heck is going on with me? Am I still just that crying child who was abandoned by his father? Do I not have a spine? Do I have no soul? What the heck is going on with me? When Dad decides to take Riko and it's time to go visit Mom, Hitoyoshi manages to finally stand up to his father by saying that he wants to have Yuki there. His father agrees, that's absolutely fine, and then Yuki takes Hitoyoshi up to the roof where there, as the sun is setting, she gifts him the toy which she has accidentally cracked thanks to her own nervousness and superhuman strength. But Hitoyoshi accepts it all the same. They share a heart-to-heart, and Hitoyoshi, capitalizing on the atmosphere momentum of the moment, confesses to Yuki, and she says, I love you back. But he recognizes that's the love of someone for basically a family member. And Hitoyoshi feels absolutely distraught. He feels broken because he's like, oh my gosh, I confessed, and obviously my feelings didn't reach her because she doesn't feel the same way about me. And the episode ends, and the season ends, with Yuki feeling that thump thump, thump thump of a quickening heart. Is something changing? And there's no explanation, there's no promise for another season. This was a bold move. And I really say that this is a bold move because, well, there's no guarantee that this show is going to get greenlit for a second season. The show has to have done very well over in Japan to get that kind of recognition in order to continue. Now, the manga has been selling fairly well. It is well received, and it's really an excellent story when it's told in its entirety, something that the anime did not do. As a result of that, it makes me really wonder if we are ever going to get a second season. It's very clear that the writers thought, look, if we leave this off right here, this is a perfect emotional cliffhanger because you don't really know what's going to happen next unless you've read the manga. Because Hideyoshi feels like he's been turned down and Yuki's beginning to change because there is now a hint that she could actually really start falling in love with him. And now, obviously, the door is thrown open for so many more shenanigans to come. The dad seems to know that something is up. There's this little hint in there about Riko being a vampire, which is where the manga comes on in to be like, yes, she is. So too is Hideyoshi. Or at the very least, descendants of vampires. And of course, there is this whole world of assassins just waiting to come flooding on in. And really, after these chapters that have been in the most recent episodes of the anime, this is where everything starts taking a very dark and dramatic turn as Yuki's past begins to catch up with her. The world is expanded, and Hideyoshi finds himself in the middle of this, thinking that, well, he's just taking care of a good friend, while Yuki begins to send him into a new whirlwind because she starts developing real feelings for him, which are further complicated by all of the assassins who begin coming into their lives, as well as the more supernatural elements that were introduced earlier on, now coming more to the forefront, which again, the anime doesn't really have any of this because it decided to focus more on the rom-com aspects than on the world of supernatural killers, of assassins, and just the darkness that permeates Yuki's past. And so when I look at this episode, I just can't help but feel disappointed. I know what the writers were going for. They decided to swing for the fences. They wanted that second season. And they were hoping that the more rom-com aspects, that the love between Hideyoshi and Yuki, such as right now, and your interest in it would help to bear out fruits. Because, as I've talked about in the past, balancing supernatural thriller, horror story, whatnot with rom-com elements is very difficult to pull off. The manga can do it because the manga can set a different pace for itself. And on top of that, the manga puts in, at the right moments, all of the necessary details, elements, and conversational bits that help to lead up to some of the big reveals. The anime could have done that, but decided not to, because again, they decided to bank more on the rom-com aspect. And I've talked about this before. This is the difficulty in adaptation. And I have wondered if this would really pay off, and unfortunately with this particular episode, it didn't. And I've been seeing a lot of people online talking about how this made them feel very confused. And then when they jumped into the manga to try to make sense of what's going on, they have no context whatsoever because they've been anime onlys and have no idea about all these other elements that now get thrown into the mix. So it just becomes this jumbled mess, and they're like, what the heck even is this story? Which is why I say, go and read the manga from the very first chapter all the way on through to this moment and beyond, because it will make sense, and it is a great story. Unfortunately, the climax, the finale to this season, does not communicate that. And it came down, unfortunately, to all of the building blocks that had been set up in all the other previous episodes. By focusing primarily on the rom-com aspect, there's so much information, so much character build-up, so much world building that is missing that would make sense of what has just happened. So let me quickly explain. In the manga, we're actually served up a full, in-depth flashback to what happened to Yuki as a child. We better understand the events that led up to her becoming an assassin. We get to learn a little bit about her sister. And we find out that the narrators who have been leading us through the story are the spirits of her mother and father, who are still watching over her and who tell the reader this is going to be a long story of two changing hearts who will one day realize just how in love they are. These rom-com antics, as fun as they are just the stepping stones leading up to something great. But there's a lot of darkness and danger that they must go through, which is being brought unwittingly by Grace by investigating Yuki's sister. And soon the door will come crashing down with all of these assassins from this supernatural underworld flooding on in. But not only that, Hitoyoshi has a convoluted past that is tied into this world full of magic and monsters. And so what you realize is that with this confession comes the end of the introductory arc. All the characters that you need to know in order to move forward have been introduced. But within the manga, we're also given greater context to this world, so that way we are prepped for a lot of the insanity that is about to happen, and a lot of big questions and mysteries are now dangled in front of us, which we are told will be answered as we continue on through this journey. It is the mangaka asking us to trust them once again with a much larger story. The rom-com silliness in high school was just to get us started. There is something far, far bigger and greater afoot. A really great example of a story that's somewhat similar to this, at least in terms of the tone and the big heel turn, is Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. The first book is amazing, with these thieves trying to kill God. And then after that first book concludes, it turns on its heel and it becomes something else. That first book was only meant to introduce you to all of these characters who are now going to become so relevant for a much greater journey up ahead. And we understand the world well enough now that we can go on that journey that Brandon Sanderson wishes to take us on. And it doesn't even end with the end of the first trilogy, but it continues on into the next series of books, the Wax and Wayne series, as well as opening you up to the rest of the Cosmere. That's basically what we get within Kimi Wa Meido Sama. However, the anime skipped over so much of that important information that we're not getting it. And well, that's just the problem. Gah! So here we are at the end of the season. I really want a second season. I don't know if we're going to get one. And for the people who are like, I really want a second season too, but why are you saying that we might not get one? Well, welcome to the world of anime. Let me quickly tell you something. Within the world of anime and manga, creators are incessantly looking for community feedback. What do the fans like? What do they want? The reason for this is that the industry for anime and manga is expansive. There's so many stories out there, and many of them are very popular. Anime studios want to know which ones will bring in the greatest revenue. But the only way that they know that, or the only way that they can basically have a good guess on that, is by getting feedback from the viewers, from the readers. This is what leads to sometimes really great stories getting axed, like Hunter's Guild. That's an amazing story. So bold, so fresh, so fun. It got axed because there were not enough readers in Japan who enjoyed it. As a result, it got axed. You also have a very interesting psychological, magical rom-com, which is Kokoro Connect, which was a very interesting story and still held the door open for so many more adventures that were yet to be explored from the source material, but it was never adapted because the anime just did not have the viewership necessary to make it continuously profitable. Therefore, it was axed. And this is, again, done through very great research, through lots of surveys. Again, in Japan, they're very concerned with the Japanese-based audience, even though anime has gone global. So even if a show does really well abroad, unless it has good reception back home, there's a good chance that it won't be continued. And so this actually leaves Kimi Wa Meido Sama in an interesting lurch, because the manga is still ongoing and it's going strong. It really is. Holy cow, where we are currently in the manga, we've got some great stuff going on. And it's clear that people are engaging with it, it's selling well. This story isn't going away anytime soon. But the question is, how was the anime received? Because the manga is this wonderful juggling act of multiple genres and of an expansive world of assassins circling around these two characters slowly falling in love. The question is, did the anime replicate that well enough while axing so many other of these qualities from the manga that fans in Japan will continue to give the show their love and attention? I don't have the answer for that, but if we're looking for good quality and substance, unfortunately this finale doesn't have it. So this will largely depend on how well the manga continues to sell and how well fans in Japan, how well viewers back in Japan have received this show. But speaking as an author, while I understand why they decided to go the rom-com route, hoping that it would hook more people and that they could still tell the main core of the story without having to delve into the more horrific and supernatural elements of it, it's very clear that when we get to the end of this story, that the romantic arc alone is not enough to sustain it and give it this grand finale. The manga is able to deliver on it really well thanks to the beauty of the art and the conciseness of the conversations between these characters that is then padded and sandwiched by these larger elements and promises and mysteries and horrors and action that are going to take us into the next arc. So if there's any writing advice that I could pull out of this episode, it's really for those people who are interested in the art of adaptation. If the source material is dealing with multiple elements from other genres, it would be wise to consider why the original author put those different elements on in there and not just simply tear them on out to focus on the things that you yourself really enjoy. The reason for that is that if the author put them all originally together, it creates this very fine house of cards that, when properly put together, becomes this beautiful structure and tells a really good story. But when you begin taking out some of those elements, it can cause everything to quickly collapse. And that's unfortunately what we're seeing here with Kimi Wa Meido Sama. So, as far as adaptations go, you always want to stay true to the spirit of the story. Of course, you want to capture all of the important moments and characters and character development that everyone's come to love, but also make sure that you remember the important little elements that help to add to that. And to draw on another example, The Lord of the Rings. If you read The Fellowship of the Ring has a long chasing, not just the Nazgul chasing Frodo to Rivendell, but chasing him out of the Shire and all of the horrific events that follow him from that point on. The Fellowship of the Ring, it reads in many ways like a horror story in some chapters. And that's one of the things that made Peter Jackson such a great director for The Lord of the Rings, is that he was a horror director and writer. So he was able to capitalize on those elements, even though there's so much that's cut from the books in order to make the movies more palatable to the wider audience. They still were able to capture those horror elements and seamlessly put them into the overall movie. And so when you're watching the movie, even though the Barrow-wights aren't there and the old forest isn't there and some of the interactions with the Nazgul aren't there, the story still hits all of the proper horror beats as well as the main important story moments to convey the characters, the events, and the themes as necessary to communicate the whole story. Kimi Wa Meido Sama does not have that happening, and that's unfortunately why it all just kind of falls apart or feels bland or confusing at the end of this season. So, I hope that we do get a second season, but if not, that's what the manga is there for. And again, I highly encourage everyone to go check out the manga, read it from beginning to end, because wow, it is good. So with all that being said, that's everything I have to say right now for Kimi Wa Meido Sama. Whether or not the anime continues, I think it would be fun to return eventually to the manga at least, and have some looks into some of the real fun that comes out of that story, because again, it's pretty good. But until then, if you're looking for more reviews, breakdowns, analyses, and the likes, then please check out our other videos here on our channel. Subscribe if you haven't already done so. We would love a comment if you got one. Wish us a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas. And until the next video, y'all, tschüss.